Canadian lawmakers are considering opening up euthanasia to, quote, mature minors, adding to the surge in assisted deaths over the past 5 years in the country, with some of the most relaxed euthanasia laws in the world. So what kind of message does this send to sick kids fighting the brave fight for life?
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Nobody Watches RD. I am your host RD, bringing you more unwatchable content and yet another video that nobody is going to see. But if you are one of the nobodies that has tuned in to RD today, today's topic is M.A.I.D 2, Medical Assistance in Death 2, which is a second part, or rather a follow-up to a video that I initially uploaded about nearly 3 years ago, January of 2023, I believe, or 2022. I can't remember exactly the date, but close to 3 years ago, I did release a live stream in which we looked at the Canadian government and some of the drastic, quite disturbing changes that they had been making to their assistance in death policies. So, once upon a time, if you were an individual that was suffering from a particularly terminal illness in Canada, you were eligible for medical assistance in death. State-sponsored suicide, as some doctors have been calling it. Now, in recent years, Canada actually amended their policies on the medical assistance in death and exactly who could qualify and who was eligible to be granted this state-sponsored suicide, if you wish to call it as such. And they amended it to allow and allocate anybody with mental health issues from the age of 18 up to, however old you can possibly live to or not live to if you are seeking to use medical assistance in death. And they are also including mature minors in that equation that also require no consent from their parents in order to apply or ask their doctors or psychiatric, any sort of mental health experts that they speak with. They can ask these people, I'm fed up, I'm depressed, I can't see any point of going on. Can you put me forward for medical assistance in death? Now, in recent weeks, which is why I'm doing this update, or rather follow-up to the initial stream, M.A.I.D has resurfaced again with some more disturbing stories coming out of Canada, with rumours suggesting that the Canadian government is looking to euthanize up to 15 million Canadians, which I think last time I checked, the Canadian population is around about 38-39 million people. Very large territory for a very, very small population. And approximately 1/5 of that population does reside in Toronto, a place that was my home for close to 20 years, for 10 years, my apologies there. Although winters in Canada do tend to distort your perceptions of times. But some more disturbing stories coming out of Canada, which, as I say, was once my home. So some of these stories are a little bit close to the heart, so to speak, although not, the tenderest of heartfelt moments. But still, I do digress. So some of these rumours are coming out that Canada's looking to euthanize up to 15 million of its own citizens using the medical assistance in death system. And there are also rumours that they are going to target children and minors. So stay tuned, folks. We've got a few articles and a couple of videos to get through before we finish this presentation, M.A.I.D 2, Medical Assistance in Death, Part 2, looking at the Canadian government's policies regarding medical assistance in death. So get yourself situated. We're about to jump over to our first article of the day. Right, folks, so let's start out at the source itself, the Government of Canada.ca, an official government website, and see what they have to say about medical assistance in dying overview. what medical assistance in dying is, who is eligible, how to make a request, the process, and who can provide medical assistance in dying is the contents of this article. Eligibility, let's get through some of this because this is sort of just like a list of contents. That's what's going on here at the beginning before we get into the nitty-gritty of what this is about. So let's start out with the about. Medical assistance in dying, if you didn't know, also known as M.A.I.D, is a process that allows someone who is found eligible to be able to receive assistance from a medical practitioner in ending their life. The Federal Criminal Code of Canada permits this to take place only under very specific circumstances and rules. Anyone requesting this service must meet specific eligibility criteria to receive medical assistance in dying. Any medical practitioner who administers an assisted death to someone must satisfy certain safeguards first. Only medical practitioners are permitted to conduct assessments to provide medical assistance in dying. This can be a physician or a nurse or practitioner where provinces and territories allow, and they do allow you to learn more there if you click on legislation in Canada. There are two methods of medical assistance in dying available in Canada. Method one, a physician or a nurse practitioner directly administers a substance that causes death, such as an injection of a drug. This sometimes is called silicon administrative medical assistance in dying. And method two, a physician or nurse practitioner provides or prescribes a drug that the eligible person takes themselves in order to bring about their own death. This is sometimes called self-administered medical assistance in dying. Clinical guidelines and practices outline which drugs to be used and are established by provinces and territories, organizations that regulate the practice or medicines. Many of the drugs commonly used for this procedure are already available in Canada. Healthcare providers usually prescribes them at a lower dosage for common purposes such as nausea, pain control, and anesthesia. As a regulator of drug products, Health Canada is working with partners to help support access to drugs for medical assistance in dying. Before we get into eligibility, if you do go and check out that M.A.I.D in Canada recent re-upload that I put up a couple of days ago on my channel, there's also a segment in there where we took a little look at some of the Canadian military recruiting listings that have been listed a few years ago, and which the Canadian military were looking for an awful lot of medical personnel that were going to work alongside civilian medical staff, and in particular they were looking for anesthetists. So make of that what you will, and if you haven't checked out that first upload regarding medical assistance in dying on my channel, please do so immediately after this one has finished, or not immediately, at your own time and leisure. So let's see who's eligible for this exactly. So to be eligible for medical assistance in dying, you must meet all the following criteria. You must be eligible for health services funded by a province or territory or the federal government. You may also be eligible if you meet your province or territory's minimum period of residence or waiting period. Be at least 18 years old and mentally competent. This means being capable of making healthcare decisions for yourself. You must have a grievous and irredeemable medical condition. And again, we did see in that first M.A.I.D upload that mental health and all aspects of mental health are included in those lists of things that are now eligible for medical assistance in dying. But you also must make a voluntary request for medical assistance in dying to be eligible as we continue through this segment. The request cannot be the result of outside pressure or influence. You must also give informed consent to receive medical assistance in dying. Generally, visitors to Canada are not eligible for medical assistance in dying, so you're out of luck, folks. If you wanted to go and have a little vacation in Toronto, is the last thing you do before using their services to medically assist yourself in dying. Have a little trip to Niagara Falls, get yourself up the CN Tower, do a little bit of shopping at the Eaton Centre, and then hop off into one of the many, I'm sure, that are growing across America, across Canada, clinics where you can go and be medically assisted in your dying requests. But grievous and irredeemable medical conditions are what we are going to look at now, and these are to be considered as having a grievous and irredeemable medical condition. You must meet all of the following criteria. First of all, you must have a serious illness or disease or a disability. Be in an advanced state of decline that cannot be reversed, experience an unbearable physical or mental suffering from your illness, disease, disability, or state of decline that cannot be relieved under conditions that you consider that are acceptable. You do not need to have a fatal or terminal condition to be eligible for medical assistance in dying. If your only medical condition is mental illness, you are not eligible for medical assistance in dying until March 17th of 2027. So only in a little over a year time, maybe 18 months time, you will be eligible in Canada to use the process of medical assistance death if you are an individual that suffers from mental health issues. So that is not the case at the moment, but this is something that they have been leading up to. In the initial live stream that I put out around about 3 years ago, we were looking at the prospect that this is going to be included, and we also looked in that video how they were sort of targeting homeless people or people facing poverty. You know, rather than live a life of poverty, why don't you just do the right thing and go and get yourself medically suicided. But if you have a mental illness along with other mental conditions, you may be eligible for medical assistance in dying. So at the moment, saying you are terminally ill and that terminal illness is giving you a decline in your mental health, and you're also sort of depressed and suffering from mental health issues, then you can use the services sort of as a loophole. But informed consent. Informed consent is when you give permission to receive medical assistance in dying. After you receive all of the information, you need to make your decision. This includes your medical diagnosis, available forms of treatment, available options to relieve suffering, including palliative care. You must be able to give informed consent both at the time of your request and immediately before receiving the medical assistance in dying, unless special circumstances apply. You can withdraw your consent at any time and in any way. To make a request, regardless of your location, you can request medical assistance in dying if you are eligible. If you are experiencing a lot of pain and suffering due to your medical situation, talk to your physician or nurse practitioner. You can discuss options related to your circumstances and your possible interest in medical assistance in dying. How and where this service will be offered is determined by medical institutions, provinces and territories, and the organizations that regulate health professionals. You may have to meet other requirements. Your health care provider can tell you more. If you do not have a if you do not have a regular practitioner, you in your province or territory may have a central coordination service that can help with your decision. Support and resources are the role of provinces and territories. Policies and procedures may vary depending on where you live. Provinces and territories can create health-related laws on rules that may affect medical assistance in dying services. However, they cannot permit actions that are prohibited under the criminal code. Rules that can affect medical assistance in dying can include data and information collection, the use of specific forms to fill out, special medical training for providers of the service, rules or requirements for either type of medical assistance in dying. If you have questions about the law and policies in your specific region, contact your province or territory. Procedural safeguards. This is going to be interesting. Before a medical practitioner administers medical assistance in dying, they must satisfy certain safeguards. These include making sure that you, 1, have 2 independent medical assistants, 2, make a written request signed by an independent witness. Number 3 is know that you can withdraw your request at any time. 4, provide final consent before receiving medical assistance in dying. And 5, give advice consent if applicable. They must also meet extra safeguards in the event that your death is not naturally foreseeable. Medical assessments. When you make your request for medical assistance in dying, 2 independent medical practitioners or physicians or nurse practitioners must assess it. Your medical practitioner must make sure that you meet all the legal eligibility criteria. The second practitioner must also provide a written opinion confirming that you are eligible. The medical practitioner providing the original assessment and the one giving the second opinion must be independent. This means they cannot knowingly benefit from your death, hold a position of authority over the other, be connected to the other or to you in a way that could affect their objectivity. Making a written request, you must sign a written request that says you want to have a medically assisted death, and the request must include your signature confirming your request for M.A.I.D. If you can't write, another adult can sign the request on your behalf under your clear direction. This adult must be at least 18 years of age, understand what it means to request medical assistance in dying, not benefit from your death. For example, they must not be an heir to your estate. Interestingly enough, they put that in there because I could imagine there could be some sort of folks with older parents that, if we could just get rid of them, then that fortune would be all of ours. But the other thing that they require is a written request must be signed and dated before 1 independent witness who must also sign and date the request. Some provinces and territories may have a specific request from you to complete, so you can get this form from your healthcare provider or your territorial government website. Independent witnesses, the role of independent witnesses to confirm the signing and dating of the request and that the person requesting medical assistance in dying understands what they are signing, as well as they must be 18 years of age, can be a paid professional personnel in a healthcare worker, and must understand what it means to request assistance in dying. To be considered independent, this means that the witness cannot benefit from death, be an unpaid caregiver or an owner or operator of a healthcare facility where you live or are receiving care. Withdrawing your request, you must be informed of your rights to withdraw your request for medical assistance in dying at any time and in any manner. You do not have to proceed even if you're found eligible for the service. Your final consent immediately before receiving medical assistance in dying, you must be given the opportunity to withdraw the consent and affirm your consent if you do not wish to withdraw it. An exception to this requirement is possible if you have a waiver or final consent. You can waive the requirements to provide consent just before you receive receive medical assistance in dying only if your natural death is reasonably foreseeable and, while you had a decision-making capacity, you assessed and approved to receive the medical assistance in dying, your practitioner advised that you are at risk of losing capacity to provide final consent, or that you have made a written arrangement with your practitioner to provide consent in advance of your chosen date, if you no longer have the capacity to consent on that date. So if you're going to be losing your marbles, you can ask your practitioner in advance to sign on behalf of your consent when the time comes for the medical assistance in dying. Any arrangements for the waiver of final consent will be considered invalid if at the time you are to receive medical assistance in dying you no longer have capacity and demonstrate refusal or resistance to the administration of M.A.I.D by words, sounds, or gestures. Reflexes and other types of involuntary movements do not constitute as refusal to resistance. Examples of involuntary movements include responses to touch or the insertion of a needle. Advanced cases, consent in cases of self-administrated medical assistance in death. You can make a written arrangement with your practitioner so that they can administer medical assistance in dying in the event of failed self-administration. So if you choose to have self-administration, but at the time comes you sort of back out of it, then I guess that a practitioner can sort of open your mouth and shove the pill down your throat and make you swallow it. This arrangement allows for a clinician administrated medical assistance in dying if there are complications during self-administration that cause your loss of decision-making capacity, but not your death. This means that your medical practitioner must be present at the time that you self-administer the medications. Requests where your natural death is not reasonably foreseeable. This is, I guess, to help with mental health or to cover mental illness issues. If the medical practitioner assesses your request for M.A.I.D and determines that your death is not reasonably foreseeable, there are extra safeguards that must be met before medical assistance in dying can be provided. One of the two medical practitioners who provides the assessment must have expertise in the medical condition that is causing your unbearable suffering. If neither of them has this expertise, they must consult another practitioner with the expertise required to administer the requirements for you. You must be informed of available means to relieve your suffering and offered consultations with professionals who provide services, including, where appropriate, palliative care, community services, counselling service, mental health and disability support. Waivers. How much longer have we got to get through this? We're nearly at the bottom, folks. Sorry, it is a little bit long, but this is a government article, guys, a government document, if you like, providing and outlining all the requirements for both practitioners and services providing M.A.I.D, as well as the sort of information that you need to know if you are seeking to proceed with medical assisted death. You and your practitioners must have discussed reasonable and available means to relieve your suffering and all agree that you have seriously considered these means. So if you sort of, you've got to rule everything out possible before this, and if, once you've sort of been given all the options and you decide that none of those options are really going to sort your situation or do it for you, only then are you eligible for medical assistance in death. So let's just sort of quickly get down to number 5 there. Skip one of the articles. You may have read it while it was on the screen there. But immediately before you receive your medical assistance in dying, the practitioner must give you an opportunity to withdraw your request and ensure that you give express consent to receive the process. Medical practitioners who can conduct assessments and provide medical assistance in dying are physicians, nurse practitioners in provinces where this is allowed. Those can help provide medical assistance in dying include pharmacists, pharmacy technicians and assistants, family members or other people that you ask to help, healthcare providers who help physicians or nurse practitioners. These people can assist in the process without being charged under criminal law. However, physicians, nurse practitioners and other people who are directly involved must follow the rules set out in the criminal code and applicable provincial and territorial health-related laws, rules and policies. Providers' rights. Not all healthcare providers are comfortable with medical assistance in death. Federal legislation does not force anyone to provide or help to provide medical assistance in dying. Province and territorial governments are responsible for determining how and when to provide, or how and where, to provide healthcare services. They may also make policies around where medical assistance in dying can take place. However, they cannot permit actions then that are prohibited under criminal law. Supporting access, and I think this is the final one, folks. We understand that these provider rights could create challenges. If you want to access medical assistance in dying, contact your healthcare provider for questions about access. You can also contact your province or territory for information on the procedure and other care options. If you're a healthcare provider, contact your provincial or territorial professional regulatory body for information about reporting obligations and specific practice guidelines. And there is an opportunity to learn more. So that is the government's requirements and list of everything you need to know about applying for medical assistance in dying. So we're now going to take a little break from me reading articles to go and check out a video or two related to the subject, and then we'll come back with some more articles to read before we wrap things up.
Dying in a hospital is not what's natural. That's not what's soft. In these kind of moments, you need softness. It can take dying to figure out what living is actually like. I spent my life filling my heart with beauty, with nature, with connection. So I choose to fill my final moments with the same. Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see music. I see the ocean. I see cheesecake. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, with all the pain, and in these final moments, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it. seeing the rhythms of what's going to keep going after I'm gone bring a lot of comfort.
Canadian lawmakers are considering opening up euthanasia to, quote, mature minors, adding to the surge in assisted deaths over the past 5 years in the country, with some of the most relaxed euthanasia laws in the world. So what kind of message does this send to sick kids fighting the brave fight for life?
Yeah, for more on this is a father who lost his son to cancer, activist and director of Association for Reform Political Action, Mike Schouten. Mike, this is a very interesting one. I first want to open up by saying, we're terribly sorry to hear about your son, and it's a very unfortunate circumstance that you are here, but you are, and we appreciate your insight in speaking out on this. Tell us a little bit about your son before we get started.
Sure. Marcus was our fourth child. He was 17 years old when he developed a sore shoulder, and over the course of several months, it was determined that it wasn't just a sporting injury. We visited our family doctor after an x-ray, and she gave us the news that he indeed had bone cancer. It was called Ewing sarcoma. And it was devastating to our family and to him. But immediately, his entire care team, as well as us as a family, embraced him and said, Marcus, regardless of what God has planned for you, we're going to love you every day, and we're going to make sure that you live every day to the fullest. He endured 15 months of treatment, and then it was determined that it was no longer possible to cure him. So all of his care moved, instead of for treatment for cure, to treatment for symptoms and quality of life. And we're incredibly thankful to the palliative and hospice facilities here in Canada that treat children very well. This dovetailed with the work that I do. I've been working on the euthanasia policy, that file for ARPA, the Association for Reform Political Action, for the past number of years. And it was as though this experience just enhanced my passion for stopping the slippery slope that Canada is indeed on.
Mike, my heart breaks for you and your family. I'm so sorry. And you mentioned the work that you're doing. Let's talk about this possible relaxation of this law that allows children to be offered euthanasia. Talk to us more about this.
Well, it's even shocking for us in Canada to be going through this lived experience as a nation. I mean, it was only 6 years ago when Canada's lawmakers decided that euthanasia was going to be legal for a very small minority of people who were very near the end of their life and whose death was imminent within a few days. And 6 years later, now we're talking about euthanasia for children. As of March 2023, euthanasia is going to be available for people with mental illness. It's already available for people with disabilities. So it's very tragic because it's sending the message to Canadians who are dealing with physical and mental health challenges that their life actually isn't worth living, and they might want to consider asking a doctor to end it.
Yeah, well, they recently expanded this to people in, quote, discomfort, which is, there was recently the story of the young man who had diabetes and wanted to do it because of that, and he was initially approved. Obviously, it was overturned. But, this is talking about mature minors, okay? You can't get a tattoo until you're 18. You can't join the military. You can't vote. You can't own guns. Well, you can't own many guns in Canada anyway, but you can't do a series of impactful decisions. You can't make those. And those are, not even immediately life-altering, but you might be able to end your own life medically. Does this make any sense?
No, it doesn't make any sense unless your worldview is such that autonomy is the most important thing, and that's the only thing you're fixated on. I think that's what's frustrating about this entire debate. A few weeks ago, my wife and I had opportunity actually to speak to lawmakers and share our testimony with them, imploring them to put the brakes on and just take a moment to reflect as to what's going on here. Because when we were in the hospice with our son, Marcus, it would have been devastating to him if the message heard from either us as his parents or his caregivers was that, would you consider medical assistance in dying? It would have said to him, we're giving up on you, Marcus. And it would have not allowed him to live every day to the fullest as he did right to the moment that he passed away.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that, and having the discussion with your child like that. So through your activism and presentations to the Committee on AMAD, what do you hope to see from the medical community, maybe changing the access, to euthanasia, especially for these minors, essentially, children under the age of, 18?
Well, we're really hoping that the Canadian government will listen to Canadians who are really imploring them. There's a public groundswell growing of Canadians who are concerned about the rapid expansion to euthanasia in our country. We're becoming, quite frankly, an embarrassment in the international community when we can't provide proper care for people to the point where, like you mentioned, pain medication for diabetes, sometimes even housing arrangements cannot be put in place to the point where someone feels so despaired that they're going to request a doctor to end their life. So we're really hoping that the Canadian government will revisit this and slow down this expansion.
Yeah, Mike Schouten, thank you so much for sharing your story. Keep doing what you're doing and keep us posted.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We now find ourselves at bbc.com at the BBC News segment for an article that came out in December of last year, 2024. So this is actually quite an old article, but somewhat relevant to the topic at choice, even though it isn't exactly a contemporary report. But this report goes on to say that, as I've just quickly scrolled past it, assisted dying now accounts for 1 in 20 Canada deaths. So 1 in 20 people in Canada is dying at the moment, is dying as a result of taking action and steps to use the medical assistance in dying process. And here it is, 12th of December 2024 was the release date of this article, almost a year ago. Medically assisted dying, also known as voluntary euthanasia, accounted for 4.7% of deaths in Canada in 2023, new government data shows. The country's 5th annual report since euthanasia was legalized in 2016 showed around 15,300 people underwent assisted dying last year after being successful in their applications. The median age of this group was more than 77, and the vast majority, around 96% of these people, had a death deemed reasonably foreseeable due to severe medical conditions such as cancer. In the small minority of other cases, patients may not have been terminally ill, but sought an assisted death due to a long and complicated illness that had significantly impacted their quality of life. Canada is among a few countries that have introduced assisted dying laws in the past decade. Others include Australia, New Zealand, both Commonwealth nations, Spain and Austria. In Canada, goodness, we could have made an Austrian euthanasian joke there, but we won't. You can figure that out for yourself, I'm sure. But in Canada, back to the article, consenting adults may request medical assistance in dying from a healthcare provider if they have a serious and irredeemable medical condition. Some provisions are in place, including a requirement of having 2 independent healthcare providers confirm that the patient is eligible before a request is approved. More than 320,000 people died in Canada in 2023, and 15,300 of those deaths, about 1 in 20, were medically assisted. Now, the reason I'm sort of reading this article is because there has been rumours and sort of some word that, over the coming years, that Canada is looking to euthanize 15 million of its citizens. Now, if 1 in 20 at the time of this report, which was from 2023, deaths in Canada was accounted to, medical assistant in dying processes, then they're obviously going to have to ramp up that number quite considerably to get to their desirable 15 million. And how many a year they would need to be putting through the M.A.I.D process would be quite alarming, I would imagine, considerably more than 15 17,300. But back to the article, and the report cautioned that it is too early to determine what caused the rate to slacken. For the first time, the report delved into a race and ethnic data of those who died by euthanasia. Around 96% of the recipients identified as white people, who account for about 70% of Canada's population. It is unclear what caused this disparity. The second most reported ethnic group was East Asians, 1.8%, who account for about 5.7% of Canadians. Assisted dying continue to have the highest usage rate in Quebec, which accounted for nearly 3.7% of all euthanized. Is that 3.7 or 37? Excuse me, I think it's 37. My glasses I still have not located, and this is a little bit small for me to read. But 37% of all euthanasia deaths, despite the province holding just 22% of Canada's population. Quebec's government launched a study earlier in the year to examine why its euthanasia rate was so high. One mentally man's ill fight for assisted dying in Canada. There's a video there that we're not going to watch. We might try and find some other relevant videos other than that one to include in this presentation, or if or not we do a further update, we will remain to be seen. But while the number of assisted deaths in Canada is growing, the country still falls behind the Netherlands, where euthanasia accounted for around 5% of total deaths in the last year. The UK's MPs voted last month to pass a bill that gives terminally ill adults in England and Wales the right to have an assisted death, though it will face months of further scrutiny before it could become law. As British MPs debated the legislation, Canada was cited by some as a cautionary tale due to its perceived lack of safeguards. As with the bill being put before British Parliament, Canada initially only legalised assisted dying for those whose death was reasonably foreseeable. However, Canada has expanded access in 2021 to people who may not have a terminal diagnosis but want to end their life because of a horrific, debilitating condition. It was set to be broaden access once again to people with mental illnesses earlier this year. But that was delayed for the second time after concerns were raised by Canadian provinces, which oversee healthcare diversity, about whether the system could cope with such an expansion. So this is what they're speculating. Once in 2027, when the laws are expanded to allow individuals with mental health issues, which there are no parameters or guidelines, any mental health illness will qualify you for M.A.I.D as long as your application is accepted, and I'm sure it will be, then the numbers are going to grow, and it will also sort of open, some sort of short-term permanent solutions to maybe sort of some younger people who are suffering with sort of depression for the first time in their life and are not yet developed to cope with such sort of emotional syndromes within their life. Sometimes losing a loved partner, the first love of your life, when you break up, that can be quite devastating. Losing a job, parents getting divorced and such like that, deaths in the family. These are all things that could attribute to sort of teens and younger people, adolescents in particular, feeling a little bit depressed and down in the dumps, and that's maybe just enough to qualify them for M.A.I.D. But Canada is what does that say? But Cardius, a Christian think tank, said the latest figures were alarming and showed Canada has one of the fastest growing euthanasia programs in the world. So although the numbers are low and there are some reports that numbers are dwindling in some provinces, they do hope that those numbers aren't going to increase once the amendments to the requirements for assistance in dying are amended. But the report released in October of 2024 by Ontario, Canada's most populous province, has since shed some light on controversial cases where people were granted assisted dying when they were not nearing their natural deaths. One example included a woman in her 50s with a history of depression and suicidal thoughts who had a severe sensitivity to chemicals. Her request for euthanasia was granted after she failed to secure housing that could have met her medical needs. The question came up in completely inappropriate places, she told the National Post. Canadian news outlets have also reported on cases where people with disabilities have considered assisted dying due to the lack of housing or disability benefits. In that first M.A.I.D presentation, we did look at the fact that they seem to be targeting homeless or people facing destitution as a possible candidate for M.A.I.D services. But clarification on the 12th of December, this article introduction has been amended to be clearer. There's an amendment to the article which I am struggling to read as we get to the bottom of this article, but that about pretty much ends that article anyway, so I don't think we are missing out too much there. Clarification at the bottom, 11th of September 2025, this article was further amended to make the difference clearer between what is proposed in England and Wales legislation and that in Canada. So an interesting date for an amendment there. But that was an article from the BBC saying that at the moment, or as of 2024 December, 1 in 20 deaths in Canada were a result of medical assisted deaths. So stay tuned, we've got more to come. So here we are at dyingwithdignity.ca, who I believe are some kind of non-profit or non-governmental organisation that, as you can see, assist with dying with dignity. So let's have a little look into who they are, which is a very brief paragraph, as you can see. Dying with Dignity Canada is the national human rights charity committed to improving quality of dying, protecting end-of-life rights, and helping people across Canada avoid unwanted suffering. Does that sound humanitarian or draconian to you? I do not know. You let me know in the comments, or if you are watching the live premiere, pipe up in the chat. Let me hear your opinions, what you have to think about dying with dignity and aiding Canadians to end this long-term suffering. But what we do exactly, again, is another short little paragraph: ensuring access to quality end-of-life choice and care through advocacy, education, and support. And there is a little link you can click on for advocacy, and it says we advocate for assisted dying rules and other end-of-life options that respect the Canadian Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, education and resources. We educate people across Canada about all of their legal end-of-life options, including constitutional rights to medical assistance in dying, in brackets M.A.I.D, and the importance of advanced care planning. End-of-life support. We provide support to adults suffering from a grievous and irredeemable medical conditions who wish to die on their own terms. And here are some of their most viewed resources and pages. We're not going to go too far into this and click on every single link for sort of the sake of time and duration of this video. If you want to come back, as I always say in these videos, you can do so at your own choice and leisure. All you have to do is follow what I type on the screen or what I'm showing you. Just type in Dying with Dignity Canada into a search engine of your choice, and you'll be able to find this information and look more into it on your own recourse. There's something there about fake news here. Featured story: Dr. Stephanie Green disproves content in anti-M.A.I.D video. That might be an interesting one to read. Maybe we will come back to that. But there's a little bit, there's a charitable organisation now, Dying with Dignity. We might have to look a little bit more into who they are and who is contributing to those, but we might leave that for another day. As I said, trying to keep this within a sort of of respectable time frame if I can, although those sort of plans do tend to go out of the window. But this certainly won't be one of my more 3 to 4 hours long deep dives. As I said, this is sort of a follow-up to an original live stream from a few years ago that I recently re-edited and uploaded a few days ago at time of recording this update on M.A.I.D. As I said, it does seem to be a topic that is made a little recent resurgence in popularity story-wise on news feeds. So let's go and see if we can find out some information about Canada's plans to euthanize 15 million of its.
With dip in number of M.A.I.D deaths, Manitoba an outlier among provinces. Number of people seeking medically assisted deaths across Canada still climbing, but growth rate slows. Lauren Scott, CBC News, posted, November 17, 2025, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. As provinces across Canada see slowing growth in the number of people accessing medical assistance in dying, Manitoba's fairly flat M.A.I.D numbers in recent years could point to where the rest of the country is headed, one expert says. The number of Canadians receiving a medically assisted death has continued to climb each year since it was legalized in 2016, with more than 15,000 getting M.A.I.D in 2023, according to the federal government's most recent annual report. However, the rate of growth slowed to about 16% that year, after an average annual growth of about 31% between 2019 and 2022. Unlike other provinces, including Quebec, Ontario, and BC, which together account for 85% of Canada's M.A.I.D deaths, Manitoba has seen a decline in the number of people receiving assisted deaths since a high point of 245 in 2021, data provided by Shared Health to CBC News shows. Last year, 188 people in Manitoba chose to have M.A.I.D. As of September, 154 Manitobans had a medically assisted death in 2025. Manitoba is somewhat of an outlier here, and I think it shows where Canada is heading overall, that the trend is towards a fairly stable number of people, said bioethicist Eric Matheson, who serves as assistant professor of philosophy at the University of Toronto. Manitoba is interesting because it has been fairly flat. Since 2022, really, the numbers haven't changed very much, he said. It's a little bit ahead of the slowdown that we're seeing in other places. On average, M.A.I.D deaths make up about 2.3% of deaths in the province, a CBC analysis of 2016 to 2025 data from Shared Health and Chief Medical Examiner's Office shows. In 2023, 4.7% of Canadians died by M.A.I.D, according to federal numbers. Manitoba's relatively small number of M.A.I.D deaths makes it difficult to conclude why the province's numbers, unlike those elsewhere in Canada, aren't growing, said Matheson. It's tempting to look at the numbers and draw conclusions from that, but a deeper analysis can reveal that there's more interesting stuff going on, he said. Selena Perzada, a PhD candidate at the University of Manitoba who is leading Canada's first study into patients' reasons for receiving M.A.I.D, said it's not all that surprising that growth is slowing after nearly a decade of legal assisted dying. Nothing grows exponentially forever, she said. Annual growth naturally sort of slows down. Perzada said uptake to new programs or technology typically starts out slow, followed by rapid growth and then an eventual leveling off and flattening of the curve. Manitoba's highest number of M.A.I.D deaths came the same year the program was expanded to include Track 2 patients, Canadians whose natural deaths are not reasonably foreseeable but who live with grievous and irremediable medical conditions. But Perzada said the relatively high number of M.A.I.D deaths in 2021 may have been the result of rising public awareness and discussion around it at that point in time. Manitoba saw one Track 2 death that year. Watch Jane Eyre was one of the first in Manitoba to receive a medically assisted death. She was able to keep her dignity. Jane Eyre, who was one of the first 100 people to receive a medically assisted death in the province, was passionate about increasing awareness of M.A.I.D before she died on December 23, 2017. Her husband, Don Eyre, says Jean was a warm and positive person who absolutely loved life and brought goodness into other people's lives, but she had been dealing with heart failure and severe pain. Seeking M.A.I.D was a difficult decision, but one that was very consistent with her personality, he said. Jean was a very, very open person, and I think that's why she was so comfortable with the Dying with Dignity program, because she was able to keep her dignity and that was very important, said Don. M.A.I.D gave Jean the opportunity to plan her death, leaving enough time for family members to arrive from the United States to say goodbye, he said. She also wrote her own obituary and planned her celebration of life service. Having a medically assisted death is a deeply personal decision, but it's a choice that should be available for those who qualify and would like access, said Don. But lack of access in large swaths of rural Manitoba may be a key factor in why the province's overall number of M.A.I.D deaths are so low compared to other provinces, says Paul McGinnis, a registered nurse and M.A.I.D educator who co-founded the M.A.I.D in Canada blog. Shared Health says there are currently 18 practitioners who provide M.A.I.D in the province, down from the 20 reported in the federal government's 2023 report. The report for 2024 is expected to be published in December. Of those 18 practitioners, only 3 are based in rural Manitoba communities, Shared Health said. However, the agency said, the majority of providers travel when needed to provide M.A.I.D service. Manitoba does have a higher rural population than the Canadian average, and we know that just as with all other health care, there are barriers for folks that live in rural areas, McGinnis said. Access can be difficult, particularly in a smaller area. If you had one fewer M.A.I.D assessor and provider, that could make a massive difference in the access to that community, he said. In a statement to CBC News, Health Minister Uzoma Asagwara said, every Manitoban deserves access to compassionate, high-quality end-of-life care. Their NDP government is investing in palliative care and supports, so in addition to M.A.I.D, patients and families have meaningful options when making end-of-life decisions, the statement said.
So here we are at dyingwithdignity.ca, who I believe are some kind of non-profit or non-governmental organisation that, as you can see, assist with dying with dignity. So let's have a little look into who they are, which is a very brief paragraph, as you can see. Dying with Dignity Canada is the national human rights charity committed to improving quality of dying, protecting end-of-life rights, and helping people across Canada avoid unwanted suffering. Does that sound humanitarian or draconian to you? I do not know. You let me know in the comments, or if you are watching the live premiere, pipe up in the chat. Let me hear your opinions, what you have to think about dying with dignity and aiding Canadians to end this long-term suffering. But what we do exactly, again, is another short little paragraph, ensuring access to quality end-of-life choice and care through advocacy, education and support. And there is a little link you can click on for advocacy, and it says we advocate for assisted dying rules and other end-of-life options that respect the Canadian Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, education and resources. We educate people across Canada about all of their legal end-of-life options, including constitutional rights to medical assistance in dying, in brackets M.A.I.D, and the importance of advanced care planning. End-of-life support. We provide support to adults suffering from a grievous and irredeemable medical conditions who wish to die on their own terms. And here are some of their most viewed resources and pages. We're not going to go too far into this and click on every single link for sort of the sake of time and duration of this video. If you want to come back, as I always say in these videos, you can do so at your own choice and leisure. All you have to do is follow what I type on the screen or what I'm showing you. Just type in Dying with Dignity Canada into a search engine of your choice, and you'll be able to find this information and look more into it on your own recourse. There's something there about fake news here. Featured story: Dr. Stephanie Green disproves content in anti-M.A.I.D video. That might be an interesting one to read. Maybe we will come back to that. But there's a little bit, there's a charitable organisation now, Dying with Dignity. We might have to look a little bit more into who they are and who is contributing to those, but we might leave that for another day. As I said, trying to keep this within a sort of respectable time frame if I can, although those sort of plans do tend to go out of the window. But this certainly won't be one of my more 3 to 4 hours long deep dives. As I said, this is sort of a follow-up to an original live stream from a few years ago that I recently re-edited and uploaded a few days ago at time of recording this update on M.A.I.D. As I said, it does seem to be a topic that is made a little recent resurgence in popularity story-wise on news feeds. So let's go and see if we can find out some information about Canada's plans to euthanize 15 million of its citizens in a cost-saving effort to save $1 trillion of taxpayer dollars that go on people who are of, undesirable status in society, people who may not have a home to live in or are sort of taken an awful lot of tax dollars for long-term medical treatments. So stay tuned, guys. We will be back with another article pretty much immediately. The next article comes from AnglianMainstream.org and was published on August the 1st, 2025, not that long ago, although summertime to some may seem an eternity ago, especially if you are in the northern part of the hemisphere and are experiencing snow and coldness at this time of year. But Canada plans to euthanize 15 million people in the next 20 years, the headline reads. And as we get into the article, it starts out by saying, in a recent video, Kelsey Sheeran, a Canadian combat veteran and host of the Kelsey Sheeran Perspective, and an outspoken opponent of Canada's medical assistance in dying policies, shared how Canada's government-controlled healthcare system plans to euthanize an estimated 15 million Canadians between 2027 and 2047. A staggering figure justified under the pretext of cost savings. While doctor-assisted suicide in the US has not yet reached the alarming extremities observed in Canada, the Deaf with Dignity, the movement is actively attempting to change that, pending Governor Hochul's signature on New York's recently passed bill. 11 states and Washington, D.C. will permit this abhorrent and immoral practice. But fortunately, dedicated coalitions, including the disability rights community, pro-life organizations, and leaders with the Catholic Church and other advocates have helped slow its expansion. Sorry, my eyes are struggling to read this. Still haven't found my glasses. Since Oregon first legalized assisted suicide in 1997, nearly 10,000 deaths have occurred under such laws. Nevertheless, with the culture increasingly embracing death as a solution, it's difficult to predict whether the US will ultimately follow Canada's troubling example by normalizing assisted death instead of prioritizing a compassionate care scheme. In a recent video, Kelsey Sheeran, a Canadian combat veteran, as we've already established, that's a repeat of the first one. First paragraph repeating that Canada does plan to kill 15 million Canadians using M.A.I.D between 2027 and 2047. While doctor-assisted suicide in the United States has not yet reached the alarming extremes observed in Canada, the Deaf with Dignity movement is actively attempting to change that, pending, and it's just repeating itself, seemingly. Fortunately dedicated, yeah, look at that, it just repeated itself twice, so I won't continue to read any more than that. So make of it, if you will, what you will, folks. If or not the Canadian government is planning to euthanize 15 million people in the next 20 or so years, let me know what you think in the comments. I haven't sort of been able to find anything from the Canadian government itself stating that as a fact, but I have found something that is a little bit interesting and relatable that we will go to next. So this article is actually a PDF, and I do warn you, it is extremely long, but I will reassure you we won't be reading it all. But this comes from sage.journalspub.com, and I'm guessing that the pub stands for public, so these are government journals that are made available to the public, and this, as you can see there is an open access, and it says government economics of expanded Canada's medical assistance in dying to vulnerable populations and the ethical implications of allowing the state to control death. We're just going to read the abstract and the introduction. I will just demonstrate once I've finished that how long this article is, and there is a PDF that you can actually download of this information. But this study explores the potential economic savings from expanding medical assistance in dying, in brackets MAID, in Canada, where it is currently a leading cause of death to include vulnerable groups that cost the government more than they contribute in taxes. These groups include individuals with severe mental health issues, the homeless, drug users, retired elderly, and indigenous communities. Both voluntary and non-voluntary scenarios were analysed. Now, if or not there are non-voluntary procedures in place within the Canadian government that have yet to be implemented to the MAID process, we have to wait to see. But I don't know if or not this is suggesting that it is a hypothetical non-voluntary scenario. As I said, these are sort of projected savings and not actual sort of statistical figures, but both voluntary and non-voluntary scenarios were analysed, projecting a total savings of up to Canadian $1.273 trillion by 2047. So that's with an estimated 2.6 million deaths in the voluntary scenario, mostly among mentally ill and elderly populations. This cost-saving measure raises significant ethical concerns. Financially incentivizing MAID could shift healthcare priorities away from providing necessary support, potentially devaluing vulnerable lives and focusing on troubling resilience on assisted death as an economic solution to a problem of people who are a burden on tax dollars. The findings highlight a need for an ethical scrutiny of a MAID policy expansion. So how long exactly is the introduction? Very, very long. As I said, I'm going to just sort of scroll a little bit, and I don't know if or not you can see on the right side of the screen, just about there's a little grey dot which shows you we have hardly even scratched the surface of this. Methods. This data was, read this one. This data, the data for this study were obtained from a variety of credible sources, including the government, publications, peer-reviewed articles, and independent research reports. The current cost of MAID procedures when compared to healthcare savings from avoided medical expenses is derived from cost estimate for Bill C7, medical assistance in dying. We're not going to continue. My eyes are struggling to read it, but as you can see, guys, this article goes on and 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 on, with an alarming amount of graphs, statistics, numbers, and little tiny words to read. So as I said, guys, I am not going to be reading all of this article. I just wanted to include it and highlight that there are some economic surveys that are suggesting that the Canadian government could, in the next 20-something years, save itself over $1 trillion if it can get enough people within Canada to sign up and put themselves forward for medical assistance in death, be it of a voluntary or non-voluntary nature. And we still haven't got to the bottom of this article, guys. So I don't even know why I set it upon myself to do so, but I just wanted to highlight how long exactly this is. And I don't know if any of you are interested. I'm unlikely any of you are, but you could always come back to this part of the video and stop and start the screen as you needed to be able to read this information for yourself. But that was about as close as I could find. Let's go all the way back to the top if we can, in regard to the Canadian government wanting to euthanize 15 million of its citizens in the coming 20 years in a cost-saving effort. Let me know what you think about this in the comments or in the chat if you are watching this as a live premiere. So I have decided to come back with Dying with Dignity to read an article that we just briefly glimpsed on earlier in a previous article in this presentation from Dying with Dignity, and it says Dr. Stephanie Green disproves content in an anti-M.A.I.D video, and this come out July 23rd of 2024, and now we can see the fake news being written on a typewriter. Remember the days of typewriters and that sound they used to make and having to change the ink ribbon? But a misleading video, the article starts out by saying, the horrifying truth about M.A.I.D they aren't telling you, and spoiler alert for folks, and that video will follow this article, providing of course it does get fast. The copyright requirements on YouTube, fingers crossed for that. If not, then I will replace it with another article. But back to this truth that they aren't telling you with Kelsey Sheeran and Jordan B. Peterson. Now, Jordan B. Peterson is interesting that he is being linked to M.A.I.D because in the original Canada in a Crisis live stream that I uploaded, this is a follow-up to nearly 3 years ago, we featured an article about Jordan Peterson, who was being lined up to get some re-education for comments that he had made online regarding certain individuals. And you know, the contents, or the content rather, of that initial Canada in Crisis stream was euthanasia, labor camps, and re-education, all things that you would associate with Nazi Germany, or maybe communist Russia, North Korea perhaps. So it is interesting, as I will get back to the article, having digressed about Jordan Peterson, who is involved in the video we're about to see, fingers crossed, has been circulating, and it has been getting some significant attention, and it is rife with untruths and disinformation. Before we go any further, guys, I do want to point out they do control both sides of the narrative. It is always an us versus them. You have to make up your own mind if you lie on the side of us, or if you are indeed a them in any given psychological operation. News event that breaks the headlines and makes its way onto social media newsfeed. They want your opinions, they want your reactions. This is how algorithms can compile information and data and provide it to the powers that shouldn't be, in order to guide their agendas to the desirable solutions. But back to this article. Sorry, I do keep digressing a little bit. Where are we? So the disinformation has been circulating in this video with the purpose of conflicting and unrelated matters to create negative associations about medical assistance in dying in Canada, along with some otherwise nonsensical content. We know that this video is called Unnecessary Concern and Harm to those who have supported someone throughout M.A.I.D and those who champion Canada's M.A.I.D legislation. Now, my stance on this is there are individuals that do suffer from some extremely terrible illnesses and diseases. And sometimes the treatments for those diseases and illnesses are worse than the diseases and illnesses themselves. And I think really and truly in cases like that, an option to die with dignity should be on the table. You know, if we have cats, dogs, horses, or animals that are, you know, going to suffer from a poor quality of life as a result of illness or injury, then the first thing the vet will suggest to you is to put them to sleep. So if we can sort of, you know, humanely put animals out of their suffering, out of their misery, I think that quite possibly we should extend that to humans. But whether or not we should extend that for people that are just having a bad day and feeling a bit, you know, down in the dumps, and I do know that mental health issues can be debilitating, and as debilitating as a disability can be to those who do suffer them. But you know, compassionate care rather than, you know, the permanent solution, I think is always going to be preferable. So there are sort of pros and cons on both sides of the argument regarding M.A.I.D. Should it be applicable for people that are terminally ill? I tend to think that that should be an option given to people in those circumstances, but you know, to sort of try and target it at homeless people, drug addicts, or, you know, people with mental health illnesses, or just elderly people who can't really pay the bills, I think that is indeed draconian and unethical and extremely Soylent Green. And it seems to me that this sort of like Dying with Dignity charitable organisation is sort of trying to sort of make it, you know, as though it's, as always with many of these nefarious agendas, it's for our benefit, not for anybody else's benefit. And, you know, the Soylent Green Society that I've spoken about, and you know, the plot to Soylent Green was in fact that, you know, the medical industry and the food industry work hand in hand, as just it does in real life. The Food and Drug Administration work hand in hand, providing guidelines for operations within that industry. And in Soylent Green, we saw that how the euthanasia clinics provided the source of protein for the Soylent Green wafers that were distributed every Tuesday, if you can remember the movie. And the movie actually took place in the year of 2020, which is now in our past. Future movies that now take place in the past always seem a little bit interesting to me, but nonetheless, definitions in this article. Misinformation refers to false or inaccurate information. Disinformation refers to false information that is intended to manipulate, cause damage, and guide people, organizations, and countries in the wrong direction. Guys, you know how much I have spoken about memetics, and an awful lot of this information about M.A.I.D is coming in the form of short form videos and memes that people, you know, send to sort of just share a screenshot of something with one piece of information that then gets shared multiple times, and then the sort of information contained within that meme becomes sort of popular opinion, or dare say many people consider it to be factual. Conflation is the merging of two or more sets of information, texts, or ideas, often in error, but sometimes purposefully to affect overall thought / feeling. In brackets, example, beer ads conflates fun on a sunny beach with drinking beer. Examples of false information, nonsensical content, and conflation of unrelated ideas within this video are listed below, indicating at what time they are mentioned in the video. And here is a time set at 1 minute and 36 minutes, 1 minute and 36 seconds rather. False content. Sheeran refers to sodium thiopental, like meaning sodium thiopental, adding an anesthesiologist in the US is concerned with its use in M.A.I.D. The fact is that sodium thiopental is not used in M.A.I.D in Canada. At 2.4, an example of conflating unrelated matters for negative effects. Sheeran states how, you know, the Nazi euthanasia started with a compassion with and care. Fact, the Nazis used the term euthanasia during World War II to euphemistically and inaccurately describe their killing campaign. detractors of assisted dying will sometimes default to this terminology in order to evoke that repugnant history and conflate the two unrelated issues of obscene Nazi practice and assisted dying programs of today. Modern use of the term euthanasia is the preferred term for assisted dying in Europe, and it refers to the voluntary, legalized, clinically administered assisted death of a person under specifically safeguarded circumstances. Now, I'm not going to read all of these because they seem to be sort of picking this video apart every few seconds, but I will, for the purpose of the video we're about to watch, just scroll to the bottom so you can read for it yourself. Otherwise, if I read every single one of these and then watch the video itself, that could be an hour and a half in itself. But as I said, this does give you the ability to read along and see what this article says about the video we are gonna watch, or maybe we should have shown this after the video we're about to watch, never mind. And then we could have compared it. Had I been bothered and sort of more enthused about editing this video, I'd have probably tried to have lined up the relative facts against what he was saying in the video, sort of put a screenshot of the article next to what they were talking about. But as I said, I'm trying to scroll down the bottom of this. It's about 12 minutes long, the video, and as you can see, we're just coming up to 7 minutes there, so still a little bit to go through. That is providing you all the facts and pointing out all what is false about this this video we are about to see now. Jordan Peterson is an individual that I believe is sort of part of the production. He is, on the payroll for the opposition narrative, and he provides a lot of input and opinions, and because of sort of who he is, and he's got a bit of I suppose he's got a brain on his shoulders. Many people sort of look to him almost as though he's sort of a guru, so to speak. But we're nearly at the end of this article, reading all the things that were false and wrong with the video we are about to see. And as I said, guys, the reason I didn't want to read all of that, we have reached the end of it. There's just some clickbait for other related articles in this Dying with Dignity website, but I did want you to just read there, and let me just read that last fact there. While it is always true that exceptions occur, assisted dying in Canada is consistently experienced as an often sad but peaceful, comfortable, empowering event for patients. And this is the words of Stephanie, what's her name, the doctor who wrote this article. Event for patients, family, loved ones, and practitioners. Clinically administered M.A.I.D, over 99.9% of all M.A.I.D in Canada takes an average of 5 to 10 minutes from the start of the medical administration to the death of the person, similar to the lethal injection for people on death row. I would imagine that is a relatively quick and painless process by all accounts. But that was, as I said, the article from Dying with Dignity that points out, that these people are speaking ill of medical assisted in death. And, sort of, as I pointed out, there are some cases I feel that, dying with dignity, medical assisted deaths could be, quite acceptable in for the sufferers of illnesses, could be quite a welcome to their suffering. So let's go and look at that video right now, and you can see for yourself what they have to say. And if you want to come back in screenshot the facts, pointing out what was false information in the following video, you can do so yourself. So sit back, get comfortable, and let's watch the video in question.
It's been known for a very long time that pubescent girls in particular are sensitive to psychological epidemics. So there's a literature on that going back about 300 years. So that's how long the literature has been around. And that was Freudian hysteria, right, back in the late 1800s. And it just morphs into various forms, cutting and anorexia and bulimia, and now the gender transformation pathology. But I suspect that the next thing that's going to happen in Canada when the gender furor wears off, which it'll probably burn itself out in about 3 or 4 years. That would be my guess. But if the M.A.I.D people have their way, I've already seen, what would you say, romanticized death encounters distributed online. And so I think that'll be the next thing that'll confront us in Canada.
Well, here's what's really troubling about that, and nobody seems to know this. So I'd love the opportunity to talk about it because it's really concerning to me. So it's not only that it's M.A.I.D, people don't understand how M.A.I.D works. There's the track 1, the track 2, the immediate, the 90-day to end of life and all of that. And yes, they stayed the bill till 2027 to the next vote, right? So that's all great. So technically mental health's not included. But what I found out yesterday that really, really bothered me was the mechanism of the actual procedure. So there's this drug called sodium thiopental, and it's made in Italy, okay? So it's used by anesthesiologists. And the anesthesiologists that came forward with this at this testimony was, this individual had been an anesthesiologist for 25 years. He came forward with the Senate subcommittee talking about this with M.A.I.D and his concerns with it because M.A.I.D is being seen as compassionate and empathetic in care. So what he did is...
the Nazi euthanasia program started with compassion and care. Right?
I'm so glad you said that because when I got to do trigonometry, we went to the war museums. And what terrified me the most was walking through the World War II portion and seeing the same verbiage.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, definitely.
People were telling me I was going crazy. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
No, it's the same thing.
It's identical.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing.
The mentally ill, the people that are, So what's
people
really...
People too distressed to live.
Thank you.
Right, and the categories keep expanding.
And that's what we're seeing, the expansion. So the sodium thiopental, which was really wild about it, is this anesthesiologist was like, it's going missing. We don't have a lot of it. We can't get it anymore all of a sudden over this past couple of years. And so he started researching it. Well, it's made in Italy, and Italy falls under the EU. And under the EU laws, you can never make a drug that is going to be used for execution. But Canada, in North America, the United States and Canada had been using it for execution, in America for death penalty. So they finally caught on to that. And anesthesiologists use it as one of the first drugs pushed to put you under. But here's what's really crazy is they said, well, there's got to be more to this. So they did it's a Freedom of Information Act with the NPR, with a journalist, and they got over 300 autopsies of individuals who were executed in America. And they didn't just get the autopsy kind of overview, they were given in-depth files. And when they went through them, 85% of those bodies showed a 2 times level increase of water in the lungs. So what was happening is when this drug is pushed, it causes a drowning. And it's stated as akin to dying by waterboarding or drowning. Meaning, the reason people in Canada who are given M.A.I.D seem peaceful is because they're giving a paralytic first. So they're completely paralyzed, then this drug is administered as one of the 4, and they start drowning to death. Okay? So that means that when it's done by IV, it takes 10 to 15 minutes. That person could be literally drowning. Well, they're drowning to death, but they could be screaming if they weren't under a paralytic. They're drowning to death. We waterboarded people in Guantanamo. There's a reason we had to stop. It falls under cruel and unusual punishment. Yet we are having people like Dying with Dignity say that this falls under compassion and empathy when you're drowning people chemically to death.
You found this out at the Senate hearing?
No, I found this out yesterday when the Senate hearing was given to me and the transcripts were given to me. It was Dr. Joel B. Zivok, Associate Professor of Emory University and School of Medicine, the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority. So what's been happening is that case I was telling you about, Fraser Health is withholding the families. They can't see her autopsy. They're not allowing it. They won't give access. The police have tried to get it.
This is the same case.
This is the same case, yeah. So they will not give it to the family. So Fraser Health is abetted, like literally lying and holding information back. So what's wild about this, though, is Dying with Dignity says that this is a painless death. Well, if you take M.A.I.D orally, it takes between 30 minutes to 24 hours. 24 hours of active drowning while you're under a paralytic. So the autopsies are showing that you actually drowned to death and you're waterboarded to death within your own body and you can't move or do anything about it. And that's how Dying with Dignity and the Canadian government has disguised M.A.I.D. while they're offering it to Canadian veterans instead of treatment, so they don't have to pay for their pensions, so they don't have to pay for their health care, the same way they don't have to do with
that's part
the
of the
elders.
slippery slope,
Of course
isn't
it
it?
is.
Because it makes such. Well, I saw the other day, now a month ago probably, I think it was a Japanese philosopher who said that it was incumbent on the elderly to submit themselves to government-assisted dying because of the benefits on the cost-saving side.
Are you struggling with back taxes or unfiled returns this year? The IRS is actively escalating collections by adding 20,000 new agents. In these challenging times, your best defense is to use Tax Network USA. Along with hiring thousands of new agents and field officers, the IRS has kicked off 2024 by sending over 5 million pay-up letters to those who have unfiled tax returns or balances owed. These guys are not your friends. Don't waive your rights and speak with these agents independently, without backup. Tax Network USA, a trusted tax relief firm, has saved over $1 billion in back taxes for their clients, and they can help you secure the best deal possible. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they can help. Whether it's business or personal taxes, whether you have the means to pay or are on a fixed income, Tax Network can help resolve your tax burdens once and for all. Seize control of your financial future now, and don't let tax issues overpower you. Contact Tax Network USA for immediate relief and expert guidance. Call 1-800-245-6000 or visit tnusa.com/Peterson. Turn to Tax Network USA and find your path to financial peace of mind. That's tnusa.com/Peterson.
So in this is one of my favorite ones. I love this one because most people don't know this. So in 2021, they had a gross reduction in healthcare of $109.2 million. When they did M.A.I.D, they cut out another $22 million. So by the end of it all, in that year, the healthcare system, just from doing M.A.I.D instead of actually giving people palliative care, was $86.9 million alone. That's just 1 year without the spike. In 2021, it was 10,500. 2022, it's 13,000. And there's been a 30% increase since then. And a high rate is happening in British Columbia. High cost of living, nowhere to live, no housing, and no one to look after these people because the younger individuals just don't have the finances because they can't even buy their own home. So how could they then put somebody in care that costs $8,000 to $10,000 a month when you can't even afford to live in a 2-bedroom basement apartment? And furthermore, there's no housing because we're taking every single person into this country and acting as if Canadians are second citizens, because that's what's happening. Canada is falling. We have no identity. We're killing our own citizens. And people act like people like me are going crazy. I'm not going crazy. I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. We are killing innocent people, and children are on the they are on the chopping block. If we didn't stop that bill by the 17th, children down to the age of 12 with parent consent. A 17-year-old could walk into the hospital and say, I want to die, by M.A.I.D, and guess what? If you try to stop it as a parent, you will be arrested. I'm not sure morally where we have either lost our minds, lost the plot, been paid off, or just decided that we no longer care about the generation after us. But something is going really wrong when I have group homes calling me or messaging me on Instagram going, Kelsey, I'm hearing of huge swaths of these groups sitting down going, convincing each other to die, that they're going to walk in together. Because Simons has made it seem like it's bubbles on a beach in a cave.
Yeah. No, that's the romanticization that I was talking about.
But what are we saying to the youth? That there's no future, there's no goals, you can't buy a home, there's nowhere to live, you can't don't try to get a doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
Don't bother. So honestly, what do they have to look forward to? But I'm telling you right now, this has never been talked about. This part here where it is drowning to death, where you're waterboarding to death, no one, not one person has said this. I have never heard this.
And you just found out about this?
Yesterday. And I found out because there was an event in South Surrey that my girlfriend I was telling you about, her mother was taken, she was at, and she goes, Kelsey, one of the Delta hospice centers is being shut down because they refused to do M.A.I.D. So it wasn't necessarily Rebel, but it was Sheila and Keon. They made this documentary to talk to people like us going, they're saying that they need government right to do this, but hey, they're already doing it and they've been doing it. And we have audio recordings of veterans. We have the Minister of Veterans Affairs lying to Mercedes Stephenson on the West Block saying it was one veteran, when we have multiple veterans, multiple case managers, audio recordings, and written testimonies. So are we just okay with everyone lying now? Is that where we're at? We accept lies as truth and there's no moral qualms with that? Because if anybody is a God-fearing individual right now, the whole idea is I don't really care what you believe in. All I ask is stop lying. Be honest. If you want to kill people to save money, say it. That's it. Just say what you mean, but stop dancing around like you're doing this out of empathy. You are killing vulnerable people to save money to send to another country that bought you out in 2013? And that's a CSIS document. We've sold our country, we've sold our people, and we've told our youth that we should just die because there's nothing to live for in this country. How am I supposed to combat that? I'm one voice up there. Thank God you showed up. If you didn't show up, none of us, people like me, would have no footsteps to walk in. We would have no path carved out for us. You're the first in the door. You took the heat. You're like the breacher. You're the guy that shows up and goes, I'm going to kick that door in, and whatever's going to come is I'm just going to take it because I have to. You had a moral obligation, because if you didn't do it, the rest of us would have nowhere to go and nowhere to turn if you didn't show up. So I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm so grateful that you gave us the space, because I don't know what else to do, because I can't scream any louder. I'm loud, but I don't know what else to do anymore. We deserve better, and so do our kids, and so do our citizens. We don't deserve this. Canada doesn't deserve. No one deserves to be waterboarded to death except for the people that deserve to be waterboarded to death. And there are people that deserve to be waterboarded to death. And I can tell you right now that I've seen that done to someone. You don't wish that on anyone. You don't wish that on anyone. It would have been easier. It's easier to put bricks around my feet and go jump in the ocean than it is to die by M.A.I.D. That is a terrifying way to die.
Right, guys, we are going to wrap things up now before I do get running the risk of turning this into a 3-hour stream that I said it wouldn't turn into. So we are going to wrap things up now just by looking at Google. And I put in the title there, Canadian government to save $1 trillion through M.A.I.D, to see what I could find. Now this is the all section. If I go over to the news section, we can see here a fact check. Research on Canada's potential savings from medical assistance in death is which we will click on. And this is a difficult article to read, but it starts out by saying Canada continues to assess whether no further eligibility to medical assistance in dying, an ongoing debate that led social media users to claim the country has a scheme to save more than $1 trillion by administering the life-ending procedure to as many people as possible. But the independent study at the heart of the claims is not a government plan to increase the uptake of M.A.I.D, and despite it eliminating large savings from expanding the program to move more vulnerable populations, it warned that came at a too high an ethical cost. Now, I believe that they are referring to the article from Sage Docs that we looked at a little while ago, that very, 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 very long one, which was a sort of proposed detailed, research into the ethical nature as well as the cost savings of medical assistance in dying over the projected next 20 years. But according to a recent publication in the Journal of Death and Dying Health Canada, has a plan for savings that is as brutal as it is unprecedented. An October 26, 2025 X post says, and I'm sure if we click on that underscored hyperlink there, it will be a screenshot of something referring to what we've just read on X. But the text goes on to claim the government is on track to save a staggering $1.273 trillion by providing M.A.I.D to rather than palliative care to people that are, you know, in a vulnerable part of the population. But similar posts spread across the platforms. As I mentioned, memes do tend to spread like viruses of the minds throughout October and November, and sometimes featuring an article from the People's Voice, an outlet which has previously spread misinformation. And here, won't read any more, as a few screenshots, I guess, of those articles and posts on Twitter, or X as it is now known. One on the left was from November the 10th of 2025, just a few days ago, and another one from November the 10th, 2025, a few days ago. Currently, Canada's M.A.I.D law only allows the administration of the procedure to someone over the age of 18 who is experiencing grievous and irredeemable suffering. Unlike in some states and countries that have legalized assisted dying, Canada does not require a patient's natural death to be reasonably foreseeable. M.A.I.D is an option for people suffering solely from mental illnesses, and was slated to go into effect in 2024. But alarm over the readiness of healthcare systems to evaluate these types of cases caused the government to postpone this change until the last, at least March of 2027. So they don't have the infrastructure at the moment. They are to deal with the expected growth and influx of people seeking to apply for M.A.I.D once March 2027 comes around and mental illness is included to the eligible parties for M.A.I.D. But the claims aimed that these procedures are to save the government for money are similarly inaccurate. Researchers have taken potential savings, have tracked potential savings for Canada health systems since the legalization of medically assisted death in 2016. And of course, in Canada, they do have a national health service. Healthcare is provided to legal residents of Canada free of charge. So as you can imagine, sort of euthanizing a lot of these sort of these costly illnesses in sort of people within the elderly that may be sort of in and out of hospital frequently, you can see how that would save quite a considerable amount of money for an already overstretched service. But let's get down to the ethical considerations. The paper claimed aimed to highlight ethical concerns of continued expansion of M.A.I.D availability, said it estimated potential savings on health services and palliative care between 2027 and 2047 if vulnerable groups that cost the government more than they contribute in taxes had the option to choose the procedure. Everything was an estimate, Pierce emphasized. So this is emphasized, you know, all this $1 trillion is emphasized, and it is an estimate. It is not, you know, it is not an actual fact or you know, policies and procedures from the government that is put in place. Not to say that the government doesn't have policies and procedures in the guidelines waiting to be put in place. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest, and this does, as I say, seem sort of something that I think sort of Canada is used as the beta project, so to speak. I know Canada, Australia and New Zealand, who all have sort of similar medical assisted death policies, are all, as I said, part of the Commonwealth. And I think once sort of it takes hold in Canada, then possibly we will see this trend similarly extend into both Australia and New Zealand. And we've also heard in this article how the United Kingdom, Great Britain, is also planning to add medical assistant in death. It does seem that this is going to be something that is very, very much part of future society. This is going to be very, very, very similar to the movie Soylent Green, if or not they will use the euthanized bodies for Soylent Green. That remains to be seen. I can imagine, you know, if there are families and loved ones involved, then they might want to sort of, you know, bury or cremate their loved ones once the procedure is over and done with. But you could imagine sort of homeless people and drug addicts and such forth. Maybe, you know, no one's going to care about where they end up once the process has been completed. And who knows, maybe they may make themselves into Soylent Green or probably into Impossible meat burgers. but many of the social media claims jumped on the estimated $1 trillion in savings and presented for presented for the non-voluntary scenario, where the study predicted the voluntary scenario would amount to 59 billion saved. So as I said, these are all sort of hypothetical situations and estimated savings conducted within a survey that projects with projections for the next 20 years. So a lot of this has been taken out of content and has been sort of spread across social media via, as I said, memes and short form videos, and sort of, you may have been informed of this by a person pointing at the screenshot. So there's quite a difference between 59 million and $1 trillion. Maybe we'll have to go back to the article and read the non-voluntary options and what they're saying there. But at the moment, there is no policies or procedures that I have been able to come across from the Canadian government suggesting that M.A.I.D will become a non-voluntary service in under what non-voluntary circumstances you would be presented with. That one can only wonder, but as we did see in our original Canada in Crisis stream, not only euthanasia is on the Canadian government's cards, also labour camps and re-education. So who knows what lies in store. But I'm not going to finish up reading that other than this final article, paragraph of the article. While misinformation about M.A.I.D often circulates, there are also reports of vulnerable people applying for the procedure, which have led to the concern that if it is too readily viewed as an alternative to material support for impoverished or disabled individuals. And never put yourselves in the shoes of other people, and you never can understand what people are suffering with, and perhaps spending another winter on the streets of Toronto, if you're a homeless individual and you've got a drug dependency to support, then you could imagine lying in a freezing doorway or permanent sleep. That might be an option you're willing to take. But who am I to say if it's ethical or not, although I don't really think it is that ethical. But as I said, you can never put yourself in the situation of the individuals that may be seeking to apply for this service. So let's just click out of there. Widening Canada's euthanasia law set to save 149 billion. That was from November of 2023. Let's go over to the AI mode for one last article before we wrap it up. Canadian government to save $1 trillion through M.A.I.D is what was typed into the search bar. And AI says that the claim that a Canadian government is saving $1 trillion through medical assistance in dying is false and based on misinterpretation of a research study. And as I said, I've tried to provide as much information in this presentation for you to make of what you want. And we did have a little look at that research study paper that was extremely long. But the fact check, $1 trillion claim origin. The claim stems from a 2025 study in the Journal of Death and Dying performed by an economic sensitivity analysis on potential savings from an aggressive and hypothetical expansion of M.A.I.D. The hypothetical expansion, as I said, at the moment is hypothetical, and this hypothetical scenario is what many people have jumped on and are using and spreading this misinformation that, this is how many people Canada is looking to euthanize, and they are looking to do so non-voluntary. But M.A.I.D, which the study authors explicitly stated was not a government plan and served as a warning against an expanding M.A.I.D for purely economic reasons. And again, the purpose of sort the initial stream 3 years ago was to highlight and warn individuals that this was something that the Canadian government was looking to expand, as well as introducing labour camps and re-education for people that speak out of turn. How much cause or awareness that initial stream raised was extremely little, and if or not this stream will raise any more awareness remains to be seen. But if at least one person becomes a little bit more aware of this, then I guess my purpose has been served. But government denunciation. Health Canada has denounced the claims that the study indicates a government plan to generate savings as disinformation. Again, I'm not saying that the government doesn't have a plan to introduce non-voluntary euthanasia. Just at the moment, I haven't been able to find anything from the government related to that, and I do tend to try and provide as much sort of governmental or information from the horse's mouth, so to speak, in my presentations for you, the viewer, to make of what you will. The actual cost projection, the actual cost projected savings are in the millions, not trillions. A 2020 report from the Parliamentary Budget Office estimated a net reduction in provincial healthcare costs of 1.49 million for 2021 due to M.A.I.D. A negligible, why can't I read that word? A portion of the healthcare budget of provinces. A 2017 study in the Canadian Medical Association Journal estimated an annual savings between 34.7 million and 138.8 million. M.A.I.D is patient-requested. Eligibility for M.A.I.D requires a voluntary request from the patient who must meet specific criteria related to a serious and inoperable illness or disability and enduring intolerable suffering. It is a voluntary medical procedure, not a government plan to cut costs by targeting vulnerable populations. Although it wouldn't, I would imagine that the thought of this being a cost-saving option has made its way through government buildings in Canada, as possibly other nations. And here you can see fact file again. There's a lot of these fact files. Fact file: no plan to euthanize 15 million Canadians with M.A.I.D. Podcast clips recently shared on social media claim that Health Canada plans to save money by euthanizing 15 million Canadians. The clips cite a journal article that presents a scenario in which members of specific vulnerable groups received medical assistance in dying with or without consent, and the authors estimated from 2027 to 2047 that would result in 16.7 million M.A.I.D deaths in Canada. So we're not going to read any more of this, guys. Make of it what you will, and we will leave it on that, I think, for now. But let's just come and look at here. You can see here fact check research on Canada's potential savings from M.A.I.D. There's the Sage Journal, which we looked at, highlighted that article. Fact file: no plan to euthanize 15 million. Canada gave citizens the right to die. Doctors are worried about. Let's click on that one. Sorry. It is a little bit difficult to read, if I remember rightly. There was an option to listen to it, but you can't in it's blocked by a paywall, so we won't do that. And here we go, Toronto Star, fact file: no plan to euthanize 15 million. And it is pretty much word for word from the other one that we just read. Pop-ups, pop-ups, pop-ups. So that's it, guys. I am going to love and leave you for now. Hopefully you found this stream interesting and informative, and make of it, as of always, what you will. Until the next one, this is RD signing out for now. So as always, be sure to be excellent to each other. May the force be with us all, and take care until next time.
If you see it, I told you.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog. Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!
Hey, Luke. May the force be with you.
All right. Take care now. Bye-bye then.